A shocking confession rocked Daystar live on air. During what seemed like a normal broadcast, Rebecca Lamb suddenly exposed Joni and Doug's deepest, darkest secret, the one they never wanted the public to know. The studio fell silent as the truth unraveled in real time. Viewers couldn't believe their eyes. Was this the end of Daystar's perfect image? The revelation sent shockwaves through the Christian TV world, and nothing will ever be the same again. The studio was glowing under the hot lights, cameras rolling, everyone smiling like it was just another easy Daystar morning. But something in the air felt different that day. Heavier, tense, like the room itself could sense what was coming. Rebecca Lamb sat there between her mother, Joni, and the guest host, her posture calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked every bit the soft-spoken daughter of a famous ministry family. No one had a clue that within minutes she was about to change everything. When the camera cut to her, she didn't flinch. Her voice was steady, not dramatic, not angry, just real. "There's something I need to say," she began. Everyone froze for a second, confused. The control room went silent. Even Joni glanced over, trying to figure out what her daughter was doing. Rebecca continued, her words simple but sharp, cutting through years of silence. She spoke about the truth she'd been forced to hide, the things people didn't see behind the perfect smiles and sermons. She talked about loyalty, about the cost of keeping secrets, about how sometimes silence can destroy more than it protects. The audience didn't know how to react. Some stared at the screen, thinking it was a script, maybe a setup for a sermon. But the look in Rebecca's eyes told a different story. This wasn't planned. She wasn't reading from a teleprompter. She was speaking from a place of pain and courage that had been buried for years. Every word landed heavy, like thunder rolling through the studio. Her mother tried to cut in, tried to steer the show back on track, but it was too late. The curtain had already been pulled back. Rebecca wasn't attacking anyone. She wasn't shouting or blaming. She was simply telling the truth. The truth about what it feels like to live in a world built on appearances, to love a family that also kept her silent. Viewers across the country sat frozen, their hearts racing as they realized they were witnessing something raw and unfiltered on live Christian television, something that wasn't meant to happen. When the cameras finally cut to commercial, the damage was done. The illusion had shattered. For the first time, the world saw Rebecca not as a pastor's daughter or a quiet co-host, but as a woman who refused to stay silent any longer. And in that moment, the story of Daystar changed forever. After the chaos of that live broadcast, Rebecca's world didn't calm down. It only grew quieter, heavier, lonelier. The studio lights that had once felt like home now made her stomach twist. Every hallway at Daystar whispered memories of her father, Marcuslamb, his voice, his laughter, his faith. But he was gone now, and without him, everything felt hollow. Her mother threw herself into keeping the ministry alive, keeping the cameras rolling, keeping the illusion that nothing had changed. But behind the smiles and prayers, cracks were forming. Rebecca tried to keep up the image too. For a while, she convinced herself that staying quiet was the right thing to do. Her father always said, "We protect the ministry first." So she did, even when it meant burying her own voice. Years earlier, she and her husband JW had signed a document, an NDA, that was supposed to protect the family and the work of God. At first, it sounded simple. Legal stuff, paperwork, just another part of being involved in a big organization. But as time passed, Rebecca realized it wasn't just about money or contracts. That paper was a chain. Every time she thought about speaking up, every time something didn't feel right, she remembered the warning. Stay quiet or lose everything. Those words haunted her. It wasn't written in bold on the page, but it might as well have been. That NDA had become a wall around her, one she couldn't climb over no matter how hard she tried. She prayed about it, cried about it, tried to make peace with it. "Maybe God wants me to stay silent," she'd whisper to herself at night. "Maybe it's a test." But deep down, she knew it wasn't peace she felt. It was fear, and fear doesn't come from God. Still, she stayed quiet, telling herself that protecting her family's image was the same thing as protecting her faith. When her father died in 2021, everything she believed began to crumble. Marcus had been the glue that held them all together, the one who made sense of chaos. With him gone, the balance disappeared. Rebecca tried to be strong for her mother, for her siblings, for the viewers who still tuned in every day looking for comfort. But the more she smiled for the cameras, the more she felt like a stranger in her own life. Then came the day her mother, Joni, introduced Dr. Dougweiss to the world not just as a friend, but as her new partner. The relationship moved fast, too fast. To the world, it was a story of healing and second chances. But to Rebecca, it felt like losing her father all over again. Every photo, every interview, every new love story post online made her chest ache. She wanted to understand, to talk to her mother, but every conversation ended in anger. The distance between them grew wider and the silence grew heavier. Rebecca turned back to her faith, to prayer, asking God what to do. She wanted to believe that keeping quiet was still the right thing, but her heart kept whispering otherwise. The NDA, that piece of paper she had signed so long ago, sat in a drawer like a ghost. It reminded her that even if she wanted to tell the truth, she couldn't. Not without losing everything. Her family, her home, her place in the ministry. Months turned into years. Then, one quiet morning in early 2024, something happened that would change everything. Rebecca was scrolling through her phone when a headline stopped her cold. Texas passes Trey's law. She clicked it, not thinking much of it, but as she read the article, her heart began to race. The new law stated that non-disclosure agreements could no longer be used to hide abuse, misconduct, or unethical behavior within organizations, especially religious ones. She read the words over and over again, her hands trembling. Could this be real? Could this finally mean freedom? For the first time in years, the chain around her chest loosened. That document, the one that had silenced her, controlled her, haunted her, no longer had power over her. The law had changed, and with it, her entire world shifted. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with JW. The house was dark except for a single lamp casting a soft glow over the paper spread out in front of them. The NDA, old letters, journal entries, prayers she had written but never spoken aloud. "If we do this," JW said quietly, "there's no going back." Rebecca looked at him through tears. "I know," she whispered, "but I can't live like this anymore." They prayed together for a long time, their hands clasped, voices shaking as they asked for courage, for wisdom, for peace. Rebecca had spent years asking God for a sign, and now she felt certain this was it. She wasn't being rebellious. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was simply ready to stop living in fear. The next few days were a blur. Rebecca couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying moments from the past, conversations, secrets, the way her mother's eyes had gone cold the last time they spoke. She thought about her father and the words he always preached. Truth and love must walk together. For years, she had separated the two. Now she finally understood that one couldn't exist without the other. So, one quiet morning before sunrise, she opened her laptop. The house was still, the world outside peaceful. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before she began to type. She didn't plan every word, they just came out raw and honest. She wrote about the silence, the fear, the cost of protecting an image instead of living in truth. She wrote about how faith had been twisted into control and how breaking that silence wasn't betrayal, it was freedom. When she finished, her heart was racing. She read it once, twice, and then whispered a small prayer. "God, let this be for you." Then, with trembling hands, she pressed post. For a moment, nothing happened. The screen stayed the same, her words sitting there quietly in the digital void. But something inside her shifted, a calm she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know what the world would say or what her family would do, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. The law had broken the chains, but Rebecca had done something even greater. She had chosen to walk free. And as the first light of morning filled the room, she realized that this wasn't just about speaking out. It was about reclaiming her voice, her faith, and her peace. The silence that once held her captive was gone. In its place was truth, raw, messy, beautiful truth. And for the first time in a long, long while, Rebecca could finally breathe. When Rebecca pressed post, she didn't expect the world to stop. She thought maybe a few people would read her message. Close friends, some old supporters, maybe a handful of strangers who still followed her on social media. She didn't write it to cause a scene. She wasn't trying to destroy anyone. It was just her truth, simple and raw after years of silence. But within hours, that quiet confession turned into something much bigger than she ever imagined. At first, it started small, a few comments here and there, messages of love, words like, "Thank you for being brave," and "You're not alone." Rebecca felt her heart lift a little. Maybe people would understand. Maybe they'd see that she wasn't trying to attack her family or the ministry, just trying to breathe again. But by the next morning, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her post had been shared hundreds, then thousands of times. Screenshots were spreading across Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Someone had tagged a Christian news outlet, and by noon, the headlines were everywhere. Daystar daughter breaks her silence. Rebecca sat frozen at her kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at the screen as messages poured in faster than she could read them. Journalists were emailing her for interviews. Old friends from church were texting her with shock and confusion. Her notifications were endless, some kind, some cruel. The internet was splitting in half before her eyes. On one side, people were praising her. "You're a light in the dark," one woman wrote. "It's time someone told the truth about what happens behind the curtain." Others shared stories of their own. People from ministries, churches, and Christian organizations who said they too had been silenced by NDAs. Her inbox filled with words like thank you, brave, truth, freedom. But the other side wasn't so kind. "You're betraying your family. How dare you shame your mother like this? The devil is using you to attack God's work." Rebecca tried not to read them, but she couldn't help it. Each message felt like a punch to the chest. She had expected some backlash, but not this flood of hate. Not from people who once called her sister in Christ. Inside Daystar, chaos erupted. The story spread faster than wildfire. The phone lines blew up with donors demanding answers, employees whispering in hallways, trying to make sense of what they were seeing online. Some stood with Rebecca quietly, sending her private messages of support they couldn't risk posting publicly. Others turned away, pretending not to know her at all. Her mother, Joni, stayed silent, at least at first. Rebecca tried calling her the night the story went viral. She hoped even then they could talk. She wasn't angry. She just wanted her mom to understand why she did it. But the call rang and rang with no answer. Hours later, her phone buzzed with a text. "I'm praying for you." 4 words. No warmth, no love, no understanding. Just that. Rebecca stared at the message until the words blurred. She felt like she was falling apart, her heart breaking all over again. For years, she had dreamed about speaking her truth, but she'd never imagined it would feel like this. Freedom wrapped in heartbreak. She wasn't angry at her mother, not really. She was just sad. Sad that telling the truth meant losing the person she'd spent her whole life trying to protect. The days that followed felt unreal. Every Christian talk show, podcast, and YouTube channel had an opinion. Some hosts praised her courage, saying she'd done what others were too afraid to do. Others tore her apart, calling her bitter, lost, rebellious. They analyzed her every word, every facial expression, every post. Strangers debated her faith as if they knew her heart. Rebecca stopped going online for a while. She deleted apps from her phone just to breathe again. JW, her husband, stayed close, reminding her that she had done the right thing. "Truth always divides before it heals," he told her gently. She wanted to believe him, but most days it felt like the world was burning around her. Still, even in the noise, something unexpected began to happen. Messages started pouring in. Private ones, quiet ones. Women and men she had never met wrote to her, thanking her for giving them courage. Some said they had signed NDAs too, that they'd been forced to stay silent about things that haunted them. "Your courage gave me courage," one woman wrote. "You're not alone." Rebecca realized then that what she had done wasn't just about her family anymore. It was bigger. Her story had opened a door that couldn't be closed. Churches began quietly discussing their own policies. Ministries started rethinking the way they handled secrets. The conversation that had been buried for so long was finally out in the open. But freedom came with a price. The Lamb family name, once untouchable, was now being questioned everywhere. Friends from the ministry world stopped calling. Church leaders who used to greet her with smiles now kept their distance. Invitations to events disappeared, and her mother, still angry, refused to speak to her. The silence between them was colder than ever. Rebecca missed her old life sometimes, the routine, the sense of belonging, even the illusion of peace. But when she thought about going back, she knew she couldn't, not after everything. There was no unlearning what she had learned, no undoing the truth. Late one night, as the noise of the world began to fade a little, she sat by her window, staring at the stars. The air was quiet, still, and she finally let herself breathe. "God," she whispered, "did I do the right thing?" There was no voice in reply, no sign in the sky, but in her heart she felt a deep, steady calm, the kind that told her she had. She didn't know what would happen next, whether her family would ever forgive her, whether her name would ever stop trending on gossip sites, but she knew this: she was finally free. The truth had cost her everything she thought she needed, but it had also given her something she couldn't live without anymore: peace. And as she closed her eyes that night, the world still arguing about her, Rebecca realized that storms don't just destroy. Sometimes they clear the air so the light can finally shine through. When the noise finally faded, Rebecca felt like she was standing in the wreckage of a life that no longer existed. The headlines had moved on to new scandals, new stories. The cameras weren't watching her anymore. The phone that had once buzzed nonstop was now silent, and in that strange, heavy quiet, she was left to face herself. Not the public version, not the Daystar daughter, but the woman behind it all. At first, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. The adrenaline was gone, and all that remained was exhaustion. The ministry she'd grown up in had turned its back on her. Friends she'd known for years stopped calling. Even family members she thought would understand had gone silent. The home that had once been filled with laughter and prayer now felt like a ghost town. Rebecca spent the first few weeks after everything fell apart in a kind of fog. She would wake up in the mornings not sure what to do with herself. For so long, her days had been scheduled: shows, rehearsals, recordings, interviews. Now there was nothing. No cameras, no scripts, just quiet mornings filled with sunlight slipping through the blinds and the sound of birds outside her window. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable, but also freeing in a way she hadn't expected. She started doing simple things she hadn't done in years: making coffee without rushing, taking long walks around her neighborhood, sitting outside just to feel the breeze. At first, it felt pointless. She missed her father. She missed the sense of purpose that came with ministry, even if it had been heavy and complicated. But little by little, she began to realize that what she was missing wasn't the work. It was herself. JW stayed by her side through it all. He was quiet, steady, the kind of presence that didn't demand anything. Some nights, they'd sit together on the porch, saying nothing, just listening to the night. Other nights, she'd break down mid-prayer, asking God if she'd done the right thing, if the pain was worth it. JW would take her hand and remind her gently, "You told the truth. Truth always costs something, but it's never wasted." The more time passed, the clearer things became. Rebecca started writing again, not for the public, not for attention, but for herself. In her journal, she poured out years of thoughts and prayers she had kept locked away. She wrote about grief, about forgiveness, about faith that survives when everything else falls apart. Each word she wrote felt like another piece of her heart coming back to life. Sometimes she'd receive letters from people she didn't know, women, men, even ministry workers from other churches. They'd write about how her story gave them courage to speak up, to leave toxic situations, to find faith again. One woman wrote, "Your voice broke the silence for all of us who thought we didn't have one." Rebecca cried when she read that. She had never seen herself as brave, but those messages reminded her that maybe her pain had a purpose. Months turned into seasons. Slowly, the ache in her chest began to ease. She still missed her mother. That wound hadn't healed, and maybe it never fully would. Calls went unanswered, messages were left on read, and holidays came and went without a word between them. But Rebecca made peace with that too. She realized that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. It means letting go of the need to control the outcome. It means choosing peace, even when the story doesn't have a happy ending. As the months passed, she learned to find joy in the small things again: sunlight on her face, the smell of rain, music playing softly in the background while she cooked dinner. Life slowed down, and for once that didn't scare her. She started to understand that freedom isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet. It's waking up without dread. It's being able to breathe without pretending. Rebecca's faith, once tangled up in expectations and image, began to feel real again. She no longer needed a platform or a camera to prove her devotion. Her prayers were simpler now. honest conversations with God instead of rehearsed performances, and though she still carried scars from everything that had happened, they no longer felt like marks of shame. They were proof that she had survived. One evening, months after the storm had passed, Rebecca sat on her porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in soft pink and gold, the air warm and still. JW sat beside her, a quiet smile on his face. For the first time in years, Rebecca smiled too. Not the kind of smile you wear for the camera, but the kind that comes from deep inside, from peace. She thought about her father then, about the lessons he'd tried to teach her. Truth and love must walk together, he used to say. It had taken her years to understand what that really meant. Truth without love can wound, and love without truth can blind. But when they finally meet, when they walk side by side, that's where freedom lives. Rebecca didn't know what the future would hold. Maybe one day she and her mother would speak again. Maybe not. Maybe her name would always carry controversy, or maybe people would forget. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she had found peace. Not the kind the world gives, but the kind that stays even when everything else falls apart. In the quiet that night, she whispered a small prayer of thanks. Not for the fame, not for the storm, but for the stillness that came after. The stillness that let her find herself again. The woman who once lived in fear now stood free. She didn't need applause or validation. She didn't need to prove her worth. She had already won the hardest battle, the one inside her own heart. The fire had burned away everything false, everything heavy, everything she didn't need. What remained was something pure, faith reborn, peace restored, and a quiet, unshakable strength. Rebecca Lamb had told the truth, and it had cost her almost everything. But in losing it all, she had found something far greater, herself.